So welcome. Thank you everybody for joining us. And I know that there's going to be some people coming and going, but thank you again for joining us here at CVR. This is an amazing conference, and I think the last panel on training was really important because that leads us right into what we're doing now. And getting into enterprise solutions, I think, is really important. The gaming world's got this thing on lockdown, but what we're seeing and what I'm seeing, and maybe you guys can speak to this a little, is a lot of the people in the gaming world are starting to actually look into the enterprise world and say, hey, how do we use game physics and game engines and game lighting renders to really drive this home? So I'm going to just allow you guys to introduce yourselves, and we'll go from there. So Elizabeth Barron is from Ford, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. So I do immersive, augmented, and virtual reality for product development at Ford. And our secret sauce that we're really trying to hone in on is really around a complete model of what the vehicle can be, including all the information we need for engineering as well as design. And so I have a few slides which we can show later because I think it's better to show what I'm talking about. Yeah, there you go. So the slide, I'll try to make it quick, but this slide, and if you just go to the next one and you look at the difference between the two.
Just go back and forth between the two for a second, because if you look, see the different shadings there. And
so this is real-time ray tracing. So we have a 4K display, and we're showing this live and actually doing product development on it, and any one time stopping, freezing what we're looking at, and then studying the engineering and design considerations. And then if you go to the next two slides, you'll see the same thing for interior. So that's pre-computed and then real-time ray tracing. And so you can see how much information we get out of it visually, and then we use that with also with engineering data, and we have a really good understanding of where we're at.
So you're using this to really design the future of cars?
Yes.
And so we'll get back to that. I want to introduce everybody. So we've also got Howard Schargel from Level 11. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is Howard Schargel.
Schargel, sorry.
It's okay.
Schargel.
It's an easy one to mispronounce. I am a senior experienced design architect for Level 11. We put experience design layer, digital experience design layer on physical environments. So doing a lot of smart buildings, smart cities. Our claim to fame has been designing the Walt Disney Magic Band. It's an IoT device that tracks you throughout the park and allows you to get entry into your hotel as well as on rides.
Gets you to the front of the line.
Indeed.
I used it. It's awesome.
And we also announced our partnership with Carnival Corporation in reimagining what the cruising experience would be like using similar technologies as well. But my background prior to this was spending many years in the 3D industry, most recently working for Microsoft's research and development team on the HoloLens, working with partners like Lowe's, PACCAR, Stanford Medical, and a few other stealth projects.
Awesome. So that leads us to Bill Tanzola from Accenture. Maybe introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on.
Thank you. My name is Bill Tanzola. I'm part of our industry and thought leadership group within Accenture. We're a global technology organization, and what I do is focus on bringing new technology ideas to our communications and high-tech clients. And in many ways, we're not so much tied to a particular technology, but as was mentioned many times on the previous panel, it's all about finding that problem that wants to be solved and bringing the right technology solutions to them. As AR, VR, and MR become much more mainstream, it's less of an odd conversation to have with like a senior finance executive around that, if only because their kids are, are challenging them to buy the latest and greatest gaming gear for them, and they're sort of exposed to it in their homes. And so now coming to them and talking about, how can augmented reality help their field force? How can augmented reality help their surgeons or their CO techs in my industry? Is not a very far-fetched proposition. And so the conversations now are much more easier, and it's talking about tactical things like what technology would you like to pick, what is your proof of concept, and things like that.
Yeah, I think, and you guys can probably all speak to this, over the last few years, I think the push was just getting people comfortable with having something on their head. It was more like, hey, you got to try this thing. And now it's more, you've tried it, now what can we do with it? And that leads us to Nathan Pettyjohn. So Nathan he's kind of wearing two hats here. He's the CEO of Aisle 411 and also the president and founder of the VR AR Association. So Nathan.
That's right, thanks Alan. And I'm also not on the slide here. Alan and I played rock, paper, scissors, and he won, and so he got to moderate.
Yeah, you got the big slide.
But at one point, I was going to moderate. So as Alan said, I'm the CEO of a company called Aisle 411. We do actually indoor mapping in about 15,000 retail stores around the world. And about 2 years ago, we got started working on Google's Project Tango computer vision-based AR platform. And so we've started deploying that within retail to help not only shoppers, but also like store associates navigate to items where they sit on shelves. So, think of a shopper being able to go into a store, search for a product, find it, but also as we see more and more like online orders and delivery and in-store pickup, we're seeing it being used for the associates inside of a store and also like inside the fulfillment centers to be able to point to that product that they can pick off of a shelf within centimeters of accuracy. About a year and a half ago, I saw an opportunity where we needed in this industry kind of a global community and a trade group. So I founded the VR AR Association as a place to bring together on a global scale companies that are doing software, hardware, but also the customers in the industry, like retailers and brands, et cetera. And so we've grown to where we have about 35 global chapters around the world and about 250 companies that are members of the VR AR Association. So I get a chance to see a lot of really cool and interesting stuff all across the market. And so I'll talk more towards the enterprise experience here today.
Amazing. I think we'll speak to Bill quick about, because you have a bit of a broader look at this. So you're in automotive, you're in retail. What are the fields that you're seeing that are adopting VR and AR more so than others?
I would say all of them are exploring them. I mean, the good thing is that this technology now is in the mainstream, so it's not an sort of a side conversation. What we're seeing, the industries we're seeing the most are those that see the most potential in artificial intelligence, if only because it's bringing a lot more knowledge to their workers, and they're struggling with the 8.5 by 11 as the way of displaying that data. We need a much more immersive case. So groups that are sort of knowledge workers are the prime candidates for mixed reality. So field workers. You'd be surprised that the mining industry, the petrochemical industry are all looking at these types of technologies. Sort of from my perspective, I don't think of them as being leaders in this type of technology, but they're adopting it, if only because the price of oil is very low. And anytime the price of oil is very low, there's severe cost pressures on them. So anything they can do to either bring in a lower skilled workforce, and so use augmented reality to provide on-the-job training to them, or even field tech, field support is something of value to them. We're also seeing it more, and I don't want to take from the previous panel, but training space is another area. Yeah. How do you quickly get your field force up to date? And then there's also specialty areas, like surgery is an area where there's a lot of need for, the number of people that can do a surgery is fairly limited in the world, and being able to provide that knowledge remotely is a good area. So I would say those are the key areas now. But that's not to say that there aren't other use cases, and there are lots of experimentation going on. It's right now the industry is still trying to find that killer app to allow them to sort of take it mainstream.
Incredible, and I think one of the things that we've noticed is that, while there's games and there's consumer adoption coming, I think enterprise is actually going to be leading it, because if it becomes part of people's everyday at work, then it becomes natural to have that at home as well, and then you can take your work home with you, and then your kids can play with it. So.
Yeah, and it doesn't, I mean, the thing to realize is, for an enterprise perspective, gaming is sort of the lodestone, and that's like the end-all, be-all. But you'd be surprised at how little incremental data at the disposal of the people that is necessary to have a large impact. So just don't think that you have to have a fully immersive game to be something applicable to the enterprise. Having useful knowledge at the right time, in the right place, in the right format is much more purposeful, and has a much bigger impact to their daily lives.
It's interesting. I wrote an article called 109 Ways Companies Are Using VR and AR Right Now, and I noticed about 30% of it was medical, which was the highest percentage across all the different industries, from retail to airlines to automotive. And it looks like medical has really jumped on top of this, which is interesting. I'm actually going to ask you a quick question about your work with Carnival Cruise Lines. And you have a title of Experienced Design Engineer. Can you maybe speak to that and how that?
Yeah, well, Level 11 is an experience design engineering consultancy brand. So we differentiate ourselves from other experience design companies or engineering companies in the fact that they separate themselves into usually two different focuses, where we do the whole entire kit and caboodle.
So from conceptual to building to delivery.
Exactly, and we follow up. We have 3 different IPs, location-based services called Locate. These are your medallions and mesh beacon networks. We also have a Correlate, which does analytics and metrics based upon that usage, and Communicate, which is our display mechanism. So everything from large 4K multi-panel interactive touch screens to mobile devices, as well as little mobile VR applications. So
awesome. So right across the whole gamut.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yes.
So,
and as my title is Experience Design Architect, so I sit with a lot of small agile teams and C-level and directors of our clients, sit with them and work with researchers and engineers to provide the best solutions for our clients.
you know, Elizabeth and I were speaking just before, and you had mentioned something about, and I find this, take this to heart, and everybody here, how many, show of hands, how many people are developing enterprise solutions right now? So 4 people and 5 people in the room. And how many people are wanting to develop enterprise solutions, or are customers looking for a solution? Yeah, well, half the other room, so you can put it all together, and now you've got real solutions. I think you mentioned something that right now we're sitting in kind of the wild west of VR and AR, how anybody with Unity can make something useful. But I think there's definitely, we have to put a caveat there that if you're bringing a solution to an enterprise client, it has to be perfect. You can't be giving flawed experiences, or else you're going to have backlash, and people are going to say, oh, that VR thing didn't work, or that MR thing. So.
Or worse, you've made a bad decision based on bad data. And then you've spent a lot of money on something that isn't ever going to work.
So how do you kind of bridge then, when you first started out in VR and AR, I would assume you're doing some augmented reality as well, but how did you, originally say, we're going to put a car in VR, and it looks perfect, it's amazing, but the slight things like the shaders, you don't know until you build the car, and you're like, oh shit, that was not what we. So how did you avoid those pitfalls?
Well, I'm not going to tell you we avoided all the pitfalls.
Honest answer is amazing.
Because it's a learning process, but I've been schlepping VR at Ford Motor Company since 1999. So it's, who in here has been in it longer than that? So
the Pioneer Award goes to.
I know. So literally, when I first started working on it, we had magnetic tracking, and full body avatar with flock of birds. So we had a wood car that you had to sit in, because of course we couldn't be in a metal vehicle because of the magnetic tracking.
Of course. And
it was very awful. We were limited to 60,000 polys in our model for the whole car.
And what are you sitting in now?
And now we're in 80,000 polys in real-time 4K. So we've come a long way, but the thing about it now is we have this really amazing solution, in my opinion, that includes a lot of information, and it's tied to our product development process. So you cannot make a car at Ford Motor Company without doing an immersive review at every step in the process if it's any change that the customer can see.
So this tool that you guys have created, and I believe it's called FIVE, and that stands for Ford Immersive Vehicle Environment.
Yep.
That tool is now mandatory.
It's mandatory. So and it's global. So we're connected globally, and we have people from around the world. And if you don't have a FIVE center, then you need to connect to some area that does. So Mexico doesn't have one, so they do their FIVE reviews for
to build out of like a center? Like,
I'm not supposed to talk about cost.
So that's fine. But one of the questions I had is, are you guys switching, like, the NASA team is now switching from the headsets that they made in-house, which I'm assuming you had to do as well, to more of the consumer-grade headsets that are available, or is that something you're moving towards?
Well, we use the right tool for the job. So the way we've deployed our strategy, we use Oculus, Vive, we use military-grade headsets that have really high pixel density, but narrow field of view. So which thing is the right tool for the job, the best thing that we can do? So do we need wide field of view and a lot of immersion because we want to feel spatially connected to the interior? Use a Vive or use an Oculus. Do we need to inspect for crafted quality? Use a military-grade headset with really high pixel density. So the approach is very modular, and it's far-reaching. And so, but the other thing I wanted to touch on is you mentioned the Wild West.
Yeah.
And so we have this really great strategy, very well organized, and a ton of information, and really set cadence in our process. And then we have the Wild West. So all these different organizations at Ford, I say it's like they have a Vive and a HoloLens for their 6-shooters, and they're coming at you, bam, bam, and they're creating all this VR that leaves something to be desired. And so somewhere between the stable working solutions and the desire to innovate and have like grassroots efforts come up, we need to come together.
So let me ask you a question. Are you actively out there looking for companies that are doing really innovative things to either acquire them or just bring on their technology, or is it a very internal?
Bring on their technology. We don't acquiring, no, but bringing on their tech, yes. And so one of the I think the way we've developed our solution that's really beneficial is we're not reinventing the wheel. So we're not trying to write a bunch of code to do a bunch of stuff that, we're not going to create another way of doing hand tracking. When, we just saw on the previous panel, there's a perfectly good way of doing that. So yeah, but we do have the things that are specific to the way we do product development and manufacturing. We have written code to allow us to do our product development process in the immersive environment, streamlined without having to touch the tool and go in and
Got it.
Yeah, so it's a pretty good mix.
Amazing. So I'm going to move over to Nathan here. You said you have your technology in over 14,000 stores. So one of them is it out yet, the MGM? Is it being, I think you just deployed it last week?
Yeah.
So you just deployed a gamified augmented reality program within MGM Group. So maybe explain, how you're using that and how that's kind of leading to the next steps of using this technology on scale.
Sure, and I'll bring that back around to more like the enterprise play. So this was a solution that we launched last week at the MGM Grand Hotel, where guests were able to use one of these new Lenovo Fab 2 Pro devices that has the Tango platform on it. And it was essentially a game where you had all these questions. You answered a question, it would take you to a certain part of the casino where you would discover like coins that you could collect. And so we were able to literally move people from different parts of the casino with centimeter level accuracy. And then in the end, the more coins you collected, you got to spin this augmented reality prize wheel, and it gave you more chances to win. So it went off really well. We proved the technology worked phenomenal, especially in a really crowded environment like a casino where you've got people just moving all over the place and lights flashing everywhere. But to kind of bring this back, to like the enterprise level, one of the underlying technologies that I think aren't really talked about enough are the indoor mapping and computer vision technology that's out there. So anything that's done, for any kind of navigation purposes, is going to require that our entire indoor world be scanned and stored in a database and then updated very, very regularly. And that's going to come from like current database systems, but then also object recognition technology. Then that gets into like machine learning to be able to understand like the probability of what I should be looking for in object recognition. even in very challenging environments with unique lighting conditions. So we take that back to saying, how can I guide someone to a product on a shelf to do order picking for manufacturing or logistics, and it comes back down to this really complex database system and scanning and computer vision technology. So.
I had a really interesting talk at VRLA with Robert Scoble, and I don't know if you guys know him, but he gets pretty crazy on his ideas. We sat there for about 4 hours lamenting about what Apple's going to bring to the table, because he's a super Apple guy. And one of the things that he said is, when Apple comes out with their augmented reality phone, which will have something similar to a Tango, where it's it's positional mapping, and we had this concept of, if they make some sort of Pokemon Go game where you're running around chasing aliens or whatever it is, what they're really going to be doing is sending you on a wild goose chase to map the inside of the planet. Because really, Google's done the outside, no problem. You can go in Google Earth and VR and go anywhere. You can go inside a mine, you can go inside a city, but nobody's mapped the inside of the world yet. Nobody's mapped the inside of this room. So I think what's going to happen, and we'll see how this goes, maybe you can make it for them, but you'll be able to run around and play this silly game, but you'll find yourself alone in weird spaces, all alone, going like this, very slowly, following this. Oh, look, oh, and it'll be you're mapping the world you're in. So I think there's definitely a benefit, and it's going to be Apple, Amazon, Google, Facebook fighting for the map of the internal world. And I think how we take that data and apply it to enterprise solutions around the world, and what kind of things can we do? And this is more of a high-level philosophy question. What can we do when we finally have a physical digital map of every place on Earth? What can we do with that? And maybe you've worked on all sorts of stuff in the how can we use this data?
Yeah, I think to validate pain points, build out heat maps, do product placement, I think is a good thing. Just becoming more aware and testing the limits of the environment. So bringing gamification mechanisms and philosophy into it, either making it competitive in nature, pitting two people against one another, or collaborative. And I think there's just ways of taking that to the next level.
Bill, are you seeing any gamification in enterprise? Or?
I do, but I do want to go back to your comment. So I've grown up in the enterprise space, and honestly, when you said there's going to movement out there to map the entire inside of the world, the first two things that went through my head are, gee, I wonder what the security implications of that are, and what are the privacy implications of that. So
management consultants.
And serious, and then I thought of all the paperwork I'd have to fill out. But so, these are things
you signed off on that on Google, sorry. You hit the I agree. You have no privacy now.
Yes, but these are the kind of things you have to think about in the enterprise space, and they're real issues for large corporations that want to provide these type of value-added services. You come back to the reality that they work in, and that is, are we giving away too much information about our customers? Are we giving away too much information about our own competitive advantage, our employees? These are the realities of it. And I must admit, I cut you off in mid-question.
No, it's okay. Yeah,
but those are the kind of things that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, trying to bring in new technology or things like privacy and security.
Interesting, and it's something none of us have really touched on here, is the privacy and security. Like how, when you guys are designing something, that's proprietary information.
Absolutely.
And because you're working real time around the world, are there concerns around how do you keep that on lockdowns, or is there a possibility that somebody gets access to that and now sees the 2020 Ford Mustang and goes, ooh, I can leak that somehow? Or
Well, I'd say no on that, because the way we've implemented collaboration, I don't really think that's possible.
okay.
So,
But you really had to go through.
Oh yeah, we had to go through a lot. But the thing that cracked me up was when we got HoloLens, and we said, well, let's try this device, and I'm like, well, what's the problem? Well, it has cameras, it's scanning your world, it's breaking every security
And it's connected to the cloud.
And it's connected to the cloud. And then Microsoft said, well, just throw your secret data up on the cloud and then go down and get it, and it's no big deal.
Don't worry about it.
And
we got this. You clicked accept, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, we didn't. No, we didn't. But it was really interesting how that unfolded. But we worked through that as well.
Yeah.
And we
Well, I
have
think
a certain
HoloLens
way
just
of
got
working.
approved as a, their glass on the front just got approved for construction and stuff. So that's interesting too.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah, there's a definitely, I mean, if you go into specific industries, construction is a good one. I've seen someone had a really cool app. It was on a first generation Google Glass, but it fails on intrinsic safety. If you don't know what that means, it means it's potential to spark. And so you can't really walk into any refinery unless you have the specific certifications on it. And I felt bad for the developer. He had a really cool industry solution, but because the technology hadn't been approved, there was no way he could get past, say, his investors to approve the idea. So there are lots of things to think about.
there is going to be a literal boneyard of VR and AR startups. I was actually at another talk, and somebody mentioned Chris Milk's talk, TED Talk, as being the TED Talk that launched 1 million startups or 1,000 VR startups. And so, in a year, we're in 2017. In the last year, I think it's something like 4,000 VR AR startups have emerged in the last year, and that's insane. So there's going to be a boneyard of fallen companies like that create something amazing but fail to execute because of safety issues or concerns like that. And I think safety in enterprise is probably the primary concern of most people, and you can maybe speak to that as when you're using this new technology, is safety the first thing that people think of, or security, or what are the first considerations when you're building out something?
So I think because we use it in a product development mindset, safety doesn't really enter into it because it is really designed to be so easy to use that you don't need to be trained.
But is it something that you're going to take the design capabilities of it and then port it over to a consumer experience? And are there concerns with that?
So yes, so the end result is the vehicle that you're interfacing with, and not really the immersive VR experience. So the VR experience is really allowing us to design and create better cars with higher crafted quality, with more surprise and delight and all that good stuff, well engineered. So that's really the goal. The safety aspect from crash and things like that, that is really not part of how we do those evaluations because they're very objective. I mean, we do software simulations of crash, and then we look at that data and analyze it. And then we might change something, which then comes in, and then you look at a structural change, and maybe it ends up being something that is really unattractive.
Interesting.
It's safe, but it looks not appealing. So now we need to figure out how
safe and ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
how
a
do we
Volvo.
make it? Yeah. Oh no.
Sorry.
So how do we make it so it's still attractive, and then we start having those trade-offs, and that's the beauty of what immersive visualization gives us, because now an engineer who's like the nerd guy can talk to the designer who's like the scarf-wearing, pointy shoe toe guy.
But I think it nearly like you guys. It sounds like
Right?
you guys have a tool that can also be really easily ported over to a sales tool.
Yes.
And take that and say, okay, well, we've built this car. You can visualize the 2019 model. And I know, another car company is distributing 1,500 Vives across North America, so that consumers can put on a headset and see the 2019 models before they're even built, and take pre-orders. They can sit it and that sort of thing. And is that something that you're going to use the technology for, or is that even
actually yes, because
you already built it.
Well, we already built it, and it does evolve. So the design changes, so you need to make sure that the one that you're showing the customer is actually the one you're going to make.
Of course.
Because there's a lot of them out there that we're testing. But you're right, because what we're really looking at is carrying through the experience and the feeling you get when you're in a Ford product, and what's it like, and does it emote, and whatever the use cases are that make you feel good, or it's giving you utility, we want to carry that along and then give that to the customer in the end.
So I think the question that I have is, when are you guys going to build sub packs into the car so I can just have a subwoofer and just turn it up? Yeah, but without disturbing the whole neighborhood.
There you
I want
go.
to rock out of my car without wrecking my neighborhood. But
I'll check into that.
yeah, the guys at Subpack will be thanking you for that. Bill, you spoke offline about how VR and enterprise are aligning right now with employee productivity, enhanced customer experience, and end users using kind of a combination of VR, AR, AI, and IoT in retail experiences. Can you maybe speak to, are there any specific projects that you can speak to that you guys have worked on that really kind of combine all of the technologies together, or is that something that's just kind of starting to come together?
That's just now starting to come together. I mean, there are bits and pieces of them people are putting together. Right now, we're sort of limited by a sort of an end-to-end ecosystem. There are a lot of niche players, and it's and which is where we come in. Our job is to sort of string them all together, and the fact that there are different standards and there are legacy systems. It's taking a while to put together that complete thing, but retail is definitely an area. We've done lots of work with the big retail companies of the world, how to improve the experience. I mean, right now retailers are in a life and death struggle with online e-commerce, and anything they can do to get people to walk in their store, and once they're in the store, to actually entertain and delight them and make them want to come back, as opposed to just going in there to price shop and then go.
So I think the easiest solution is just you and you to get together. So aisle 411, you guys figure it out, and you've got to delight these customers. So actually, are you guys working on the visualization as well as IoT things? Like, are you putting sensors in products on shelves to help with that, or beacons around, or maybe speak to how IoT and maybe even AI is kind of factoring into the learning of this and how it's really forwarding it?
Sure. I mean, we can't boil the ocean, so we're focused primarily on all the data and how it can interact with all these different sensors. So we're not necessarily a sensor company, but yeah, that comes up more and more every day is, how do I pull this data into my IoT strategy? I would say too that, as we look at the emergence of new types of hardware technology, in retail, retailers are definitely looking at how do I put devices on my associates, but not only just for the customer experience, but for data capturing and updating, which leads into the privacy issues. We're also seeing, one of the biggest determining factors is, and it may be surprising to a lot of people, but it's just like the comfort factor. And they're like, if we're going to have our associates wearing this all day, it's got to be comfortable. It can't be big and bulky. It can't heat up their face. I mean, so there's all these issues that we have to get through. Yeah.
You guys tried the Daiquiri helmet? First time I tried it, it's got a heat sink around the outside, and I went to take the helmet off, and it burnt my hand. I was like, I think you better fix this problem. So I think you're definitely, the form factors right now, I keep telling people, we're not going to look down at our phones. We're going to have everything heads-up display. And then I show them the HoloLens, they're like, I'm not wearing that thing. That's ridiculous. Or, you show them a VR headset, like, I'm in this thing, I can't get out of it. What do you mean I'm going to wear this every day? And I think, we're really kind of only a few years away from having consumer-level glasses that we can wear. Magic Leap is releasing the developer kit this summer, and more people are kind of looking at this. So you got ODG, you've got all these glass manufacturers making heads-up displays and augmented reality displays and glasses. How long do you guys figure, and we'll pull you guys separately, how long do you figure it is before consumers just have a pair of glasses that they wear? And maybe it starts with, like you said, associates in a store wearing a pair of glasses. Like 3 out of 5 of us on the panel here have glasses on. So it wouldn't be much for you to just switch that glass out for something that works. So how long do you think before we have a light pair of glasses? Maybe the computing is in a pocket, but something we can really use.
So I'm going to answer that in 2 ways. First of all, I never, when I first started doing immersive VR, I couldn't get people to put a headset on.
Yep.
Big and bulky, annoying, sensors, cables. They felt like it was clinical, and they were being personally violated.
Yep.
Bad. Now, the usefulness, even though the device is not necessarily the most comfortable thing on the earth, it's so useful that they put it on. And they'll wear a headset for 4 hours and pore over an exterior of a car,
Amazing.
go for lunch, come back, and go for another 4 hours and do the interior.
How are you finding that? Are people not getting sick?
They're not getting sick because the solution with very high pixel density, which is really when they're inspecting the car, has a low field of view, narrow field of view. So they can look around the periphery, always get grounded, but always see the car. And so the 4K display is mirroring their view and showing, 4K resolution, and they can stop and capture 4K anytime, but their field of view is narrow. So it works out well, but the interesting point of that is for the wearables and devices as they come along is it's really what's it worth to you? What are you getting out of it? And is it worth your time to put that on or strap that thing on your hand or hold the sensors or whatever those things are? And so I don't know. I don't really have a good answer regarding like when I can just take these, because I can actually see everybody pretty well. It's just because my eyes are shot for reading that I wear these. It's so much easier than finding readers all the time. But I'm guessing that we're at the right there.
3 years,
and,
5 years,
3
10
years.
years?
I'm thinking 3 to 5 years.
3 to
like
5?
from
Okay.
seeing ODG and seeing what's going on with some other makers out there. We're close.
Okay.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to work with the HoloLens team from its early conception. I shouldn't say early conception.
So can you explain what that form factor looked like?
Yeah. Well, when I first started, it was kind of like an optometrist kind of bulky headgear, and they actually had wires tethered to a cart. The cart actually... A cart, yes. Cart had a display on it and a computer on it, so people could see what it is that
So it was mobile. You
It
just
was-
had to take your cart with you. It was like one of our mobile phones you had to pull out, wind it up.
But inside the year's time that I was working there, the form factor had shrunk to what it was. Of course, they made iterations based upon it, but it went from that full bulky unit to, as you see it now, they actually had to do a lot of changes for heat sink purposes. It got really hot. The field of view surprisingly expanded just a little bit more than what it is. It's even constrained now. But I see the process is speeding up more so, and there are people, there's 300 plus developers of headsets in China.
Just
and so I think it's just going to become more rampant. I would say I've recently heard 5 years for fully augmented reality, full augmented reality.
Like on glasses?
On glasses, but I would say between 3 and 5 years
So
to be.
I was speaking with somebody last night. They had seen the Magic Leap demo, which I haven't seen. Have you guys seen Magic Leap yet? And that, if the Magic Leap guys are watching, why not? Start showing people this thing, please. So anyway, I was speaking with somebody, and they were saying that the field of view was great, and just the clarity was wonderful, but you had to wear a bulky backpack, and getting the form factor down versus Microsoft has the form factor down, but they don't have the field of view, and there's a few other things. I think the positional tracking in HoloLens is amazing. You put a hologram in midair, you can move anywhere around it, it's still there when you come back. But how do you figure, Bill, maybe you can speak to this. How do you figure we're going to get past these limitations, and who do you see anybody that's going to be a forerunner? Because taking the Magic Leap from bulky backpack to a headset maybe as a year, but taking the field of view even more 10 degrees, that doesn't seem like a very easy thing to fix.
Correct, and I actually think you'll see augmented reality glasses first in the enterprise space and later in consumer. One, if only we consumers are very fickle. We follow things like fashion. They have to look good on us. You go
Snap
to an...
glasses. So this is, the fashionable wearable. Hey,
Yeah.
smile, everybody. I'm going to film you all. Hey, all right. Let's film the panel
There he
here.
is.
Awesome.
Yeah. Look at that. Woo.
And so in the industrial space, fashion is like the least thing. If you go to a work site, construction workers are not the epitome of fashion, but they're all used to wearing glasses. They're all told that they have to wear glasses. So finding industries where you naturally go to work.
Hold on 1 second.
No, I can't. I'm in the enterprise space. Like I said, fashion will always...
Snap is not an enterprise solution by any means. Sorry.
So there are industries where it's natural every day before you start your shift to put on glasses. They may be safety glasses, and that's even a better case. They don't really care about fashion. It's all about protecting yourself. And so wearing a small backpack on their back along with their high-vis vest is not that big of a stretch. Asking me to walk down Robson Street with a backpack that whirs and clicks like like Ghostbusters probably will not fare well. So, pick your battles well in terms of what industries and their tolerance for, fashion. I think it was actually ironic that Google Glass, actually their first version couldn't support people who wear glasses. If you look at all the engineers who created the device, 90% of them wear glasses. And I was all excited. I was like, oh, these guys understand my pain of wearing glasses. And it took a year and a half before they actually came out with a prescription version of it. So that to me
And even
was
then you were a glass hole, so
Yeah, then there was that. But interesting enough, if people said, oh, it died. It really didn't die. If you look at where they're targeting their market, their next generation is actually called the enterprise version of it. And so there are, enterprise customers who are really interested in this. And so I think the adoption in the enterprise space is going to be 1 to 2 years. Consumer 3 to 5, as it has to meet some more sort of.
So did you just say 1 to 2?
Yeah.
In enterprise. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think you'll see field workers showing up your house, with augmented reality gear to help them understand what's going on. As all these companies are trenching fiber, the technology is called passive optical networks. Passive means that they have the network doesn't really tell them a lot what's going on. They actually have to trace it physically. And the last thing they want to do is walk around with papers or iPads trying to figure out where this copper strand is running to your house and why it's not delivering the gigabit service that you want to have. And so being able to give them in real time where the network is, where any faults are, you're going to see that a lot quicker than I think you're going to see consumers like me.
So Nathan, maybe you can speak also to how you're going to. We've got about 2 minutes left, so we'll finish with Nathan. And how are you guys going from a tablet-based, like a Fab or something like that, to glasses-based, and are you using eye tracking to give the retailers better data about their consumers as well? Is that something you're working on the next timeline?
Yeah, so the easy form factor to deal with is mobile phones right now, just because it's easy for us to understand and get used to. I think that we're definitely going to, we're preparing so that can all transition into wearable, and that's where it's all going. I think I would agree with Bill. It's probably 2 or 3 years in enterprise and 3 to 5 for consumers. So faster than the general public might want to believe right now.
So everybody on this panel has just agreed that between now and the next 5 years, we'll be wearing glasses that will be consumer friendly. And I think Apple's going to have a big play with this as soon as they come up with something cool looking. But that's an amazing timeline. And on behalf of CVR and everybody here, I want to say thank you very much to the panelists and a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys, and enjoy the rest of the show. Awesome.
All right.